On today's show, what should the LA Clippers starting lineup be? Going to be going through three possibilities, their pros and cons, on today's Locked On Preseason Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You were locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team, every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, born and raised in LA and going into my 20th season as a Clipper fan in just over a week. Can you believe we're almost here? Before we get started, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod and subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, where this weekend I'll be announcing my plans for the upcoming season. And, of course, Locked On Clippers, where you'll know what to expect all season. All things Clippers, 5 days a week. Make sure you subscribe on the YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell so you know any time we post a video. And, of course, you can listen wherever you get your podcast. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Head over to FanDuel.com for all your betting needs. So in this episode, ahead of the Clippers preseason game in Seattle on Friday night, I'm going to be talking about something that's unaffected by the result of the game, which, by the way, Norman Powell will not be playing in. He had a sore shoulder or sore back, I believe. Let me just double check that. But Seattle, we obviously know why we play there. It's because that's Steve Ballmer's city. So I almost said hometown, but I know he's from Michigan originally. But that's his home city, and he loves doing a preseason game there. So, yeah, lower back soreness. So there you go. Shouldn't be anything too serious. So let's ignore what the starting lineup is going to be in this game because I haven't even heard the confirmation on that. Let's talk about the starting lineup. This is assuming that Kawhi Leonard is healthy, right? Which, by the way, after a report yesterday from Joey Lynn, our good friend over at SI Now, Clipper beat writer and a former guest on the show, he was saying that Kawhi is not practicing yet, and Ty Lue was not sure about his status for opening night. I mean, I would pencil him in for a no, just based off of the history of Kawhi Leonard's health with us. Not because that's what I want, obviously. I mean, it's devastating that first game of the Intuit Dome to not have Kawhi, but like, can I say we're not used to it at this point? It's so frustrating and tough. I know it must be tough for Kawhi, but man, like, this sucks. But I'm just going to, because eventually Kawhi should be healthy, or play some games for us, I should say. So I'm going to give my starting lineup pick, the one that I want, and why I think it's the right lineup for us. And that is the lineup of the three confirmed starters. So in both of my examples that I'm going to be using this segment and next, the three confirmed starters, as everybody knows, are Kawhi Leonard, Ivica Zubac, and James Harden. It's those two other spots that are up for grabs, I think mainly between Derrick Jones Jr., Terrence Mann, and Norman Powell. And I am going with Derrick Jones Jr. and Terrence Mann. Now, the pros of that lineup are clearly a defensive focus. And that's me. I'm a defensive-minded guy. I always preach defense first when it comes to team building. And because let's say we do go with Norm. Actually, no, I'm gonna save that for the next segment. But the cons of this lineup are obvious. The shooting, right? The lack of it. Ivica Zubac, not a shooter. Derrick Jones Jr., kind of a suspect three-point shooter. Only shot 34.5% last year. And then Terrence Mann shot 35% as well last year. So they're both around the same range. And that is going to be in the NBA, not a liability, but that when you're shooting that percentage from three, defenses are going to give you that shot. They're going to invite James Harden and Kawhi Leonard to pass the ball to those guys. And if you have two non-shooters on the court these days, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage because usually in today's NBA, teams will have, if they have a center out there, unless they're a stretch big, they'll usually have one guy out there that's not a shooter. Two, then your spacing's looking a little rough. 3 that they're not respecting, then you're in real trouble. In any era, to be honest. Not just this one, not even just this one. So Terrence Mann, if he goes through that kind of slump again. So by the way, Terrence Mann 34.5% last season. Terrence Mann 34.8% last year. Derrick Jones Jr. 34.3%. So a 0.5 difference. And let me tell you, that's not great either way. If they struggle to make shots, those two, our offense is going to be god-awful, and you're going to have to make a change and put Norman Powell in the starting lineup. The pros of the Derrick Jones Jr. Terrence Mann unit are that now the complete onus isn't on Terrence Mann to guard the best player on the other team regardless of who it is, right? Because you weren't seeing Kawhi until crunch time really guard the elite players on the other end to start a game. You just don't see that anymore as a member of the Clippers. I'm not saying it's never happened, but Terrence Mann was that guy that went out and guarded everybody last season, and I said many times that I don't think Terrence Mann is a good enough defender to be the best wing defender on a championship team. I think he can be one of those guys. I just don't think he's good enough laterally and good screen navigation wise. And he's still 6'5". He's not really huge or anything like that. Derrick Jones is 6'5", but his wingspan is crazy. And Terrence Mann has long arms too. But Derrick Jones legitimately looks 6'7" out there when you watch him because his arms and his bounce. But that's my take on Terrence. He even said, when Law Murray asked him, and I mentioned this a couple of days ago on the pod, when he was asked about or how he felt that Derrick Jones Jr. is here and he won't have to guard, he as in Terrence, won't have to guard these quick guards every night, he, had a, whew, he was relieved, a sigh of relief. He doesn't have to do that anymore. So that tells you, what he thinks of himself as a defender and who he likes to guard. Now we have a guy that can go out and guard those guys, a guy that's guarded SGA and PG and Ant-Man last year in the playoffs. And then Terrence Mann can take that bigger guy. And then you still have Kawhi Leonard in this, hypothetical when everyone's healthy, and Zubac's behind them. So the only below average defender you've got is James Harden. If you get the James Harden that we got in the 26-5 stretch, then his defense is going to be decent. And now we have 5 guys defending out there getting active. James Harden has great hands. Kawhi Leonard has great hands. Terrence and Derrick Jones are great athletes. Zubac's great rim protector. Now you have an elite defense. But the key for that lineup is going to be Derrick Jones Jr. and Terrence Mann knocking down their 3-ball. If they don't make the 3-ball consistently, you probably won't be able to go with that lineup because they won't offer the spacing needed to let James Harden and Kawhi Leonard breathe. But if they do, and I'm looking at Terrence mainly, I think Derrick Jones Jr. is a 35% three-point shooter, but he's going to be guarding the best players. So really, I don't know if he'll be taken out of the starting lineup. I think especially given that he has started on a Western Conference champion, he has more cachet now than Terrence Mann, even though T is the guy here, the fan favorite, and getting paid more. I don't see us putting Derrick Jones Jr. on the bench. I think his skill set is really tailored to the starters. Terrence Mann, I think he can thrive off the bench. Do I want him to start? Absolutely. It really comes down to his three-point shooting. That's what will make or break that lineup. But I also think that lineup can really lead to us getting stops and maybe getting out and running. I'm honestly more confident in a James Harden-led team pushing pace than a James Harden and Kawhi Leonard both on the court team pushing pace. Because I think you really are trying to slow things down for Kawhi. I mean, when Kawhi is on the break, he's fantastic, but he doesn't do it too often unless he's gotten the steal. So that's my pick for the lineup. But coming up, the score first, offense first pick that seems to be the most likely. Going to be talking about that coming up. I got to tell you a little something about Game Time. Game Time is the best place to get great deals on tickets last minute for an event, no matter what kind. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. And Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I am planning on using Game Time maybe for a Rams game this upcoming season. You never know, maybe for a Clipper game. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. That's available on Game Time. One of those great seating views. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, known as the Game Time Ticket Coverage. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. What time? All right. So now talking about the scoring pick, the offense first pick. Well, you know how it goes. Norman Powell, Derrick Jones Jr., and then the other three. I don't mind it. I don't mind it because we lost Paul George. So we're going to be devoid of some offense. And Norman Powell is the third best scorer on this team, and that's not even up for debate. I mean, actually, Kevin Porter Jr. can sure put the ball in the hole. But Norman Powell is definitely the one, the second or third most efficient scorer on this team, right? He's just the natural replacement for Paul George in the sense that if you want a little bit of an offensive replacement, a guy that can work without the basketball, such a great catch and shoot player, shot 43.5% from three last year and was part of the best statistical lineup on the floor for the Clippers last season, which was the Powell Rangers lineup as coined by the Clips and Dip guys, the former host of this show, Norm Powell, along with the big three, and then Zoo. So that was the lineup that had the best net rating, and a lot of those comebacks, particularly the Nets one, sticks out in my mind at home. They really turned up. And partially it's because Norman Powell is such a good fit around stars because he's just going to catch and shoot and attack closeouts and do it at a high level, which is what you need around guys like James Harden and Kawhi. So that cancels out the spacing issue right there. Now you really just have Derrick Jones Jr. and Zubats to worry about spacing-wise. Although Zubats, you don't really worry about a big spacing-wise. It's just that, to me, you can maximize Zoo a lot more if you actually feed him the ball in the post, which we've talked about at length this summer. That has to be something that the Clippers do more of, especially with how efficient he is and his touch around the basket. If they don't, they're just going to be making their lives tougher offensively and putting too much on James Harden and Kawhi and whoever else it may be, like KPJ. I don't know. Zubats needs to be the third scoring option. And honestly, I'm taking Zubats over Norm Powell in terms of if you're trying to create a shot. I think Norman Powell, outside of that hard drive right, he doesn't really have a bag like that, at this level. He sometimes has a little pull-up going to his left, but overall, when he's going downhill, he tends to have tunnel vision, and the only pass he seems to have is that jump scoop pass underneath the basket. So I think he's just better off the catch. But look, we're not going to have much in terms of creation this season. So if Norman Powell has to help create shots, then so be it. It's just what's going to have to happen because offensively, we are not too great personnel-wise. But yeah, that's the pro of the lineup is you have the spacing, you have the scoring. Now the con to me, there are several. One, defense, obviously. Norm Powell and James Harden together. That could go bad real quick. If they're not up to the task, now granted, Norman Powell has played good defense in the preseason, but throughout the course of an 82-game season, the conversation is different. So one thing I've learned in my 19 years, now this is going to be my 20th season watching NBA basketball at length, and yes, when I was age 7, I was on NBA.com every night. That's when it all started. I can remember specific dates, big games. That's why I'm very specific with that timeline. In 04-05, it wasn't falling ball. I'm not going to lie to everybody. 05-06, and that's hence the reason why I'm a Clipper fan, because we were pretty good that year. So getting into the game, Clippers were kind of better than the Lakers. I was like, why not? And yeah, stuck with them ever since, even though the next couple of years the Lakers were definitely better than us. But my point being that one thing I've learned is that you can't make knee-jerk reactions over the first 10 games. You know what I'm saying? It's a war of attrition. We saw the Clippers, after 49 games, look like the best team in the NBA, arguably, last year. And then it fell off right after we became the number 1 seed for a couple hours. That tells you how things can change, especially with an older team. Now, getting Derrick Jones Jr., Chris Dunn, Mo Bamba, even throwing Kai Jones in the mix, Kevin Porter, it gives us some youth. Nico Batum, the never-aging Nico Batum, doesn't necessarily give us youth, but does it really make us less athletic? Not at all. So we have a little bit more liveliness, athleticism, but it's all about Kawhi and James Harden. It really is. I can't emphasize enough how much of a weight James Harden has to carry at age 16. Year 16, age 35 this season. It's really a lot more than he should be, a lot more than I want to see him carry. I don't think he has much of a problem with it, but like, it's going to be tough for him. It's going to be tough. His playoff streak is in major jeopardy just because of Kawhi's health. If Kawhi was healthy, I think for sure we're a playing team. But here's the thing. We've already got 16 back-to-backs, right? So he's going to miss all of those. That already puts him at 66 games. Then you have, the games he's slated to potentially miss and likely going to miss to start the season. So now he's not going to be eligible for those awards, right? Which we don't care about. We just want to see him be healthy for the playoffs. But if we're talking 60 games right then and there, we don't have Paul George. Can we be 500 in those games without him? It's so much on James Harden. And it's like, really, if his step back three is not falling, we are toast that night. Because then no advantages are going to be created. So Norman Powell, he's honestly going to have a huge role on this team to score and keep the Clippers above water in those games that Kawhi is not playing. But with or without Kawhi, I think more Norman Powell this season is a necessity. So that's the reason. Another con, actually, I believe, though, about that lineup, outside of the defensive thing, not having that scoring punch off the bench. Because then you're looking at KPJ really doing all the creating off the bench. You're going to have to stagger Kawhi and Harden. But here's the thing, right? Are you then taking Amir Coffey out of the rotation if Norm starts? Because if Norm starts, you take Terrence out, right? That leaves you with Chris Dunn, Terrence Mann, Amir Coffey, Nico Batum, and Kai Jones or Mo Bamba, right? 5 guys. Chris Dunn, Terrence Amir, Nico, Kai, Mo Bamba. You're not going to play all those guys at once because that lineup can't score to save their lives in the NBA. That lineup will not score points. So you're going to need one of Kawhi or Harden in the game at all times. I don't know about, you have no scoring punch outside of them. Kawhi and Harden are going to have to just create every single shot. Unless we're getting stops, which I think that's what we got to lean into with that lineup with Nico, Amir, Terrence, potentially Kawhi, and Chris Dunn. You got to hope you can get stops and just push in transition because you don't want to play in the half court with that lineup. But that's what I'm saying, right? So it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. When you have Norm starting, that bench is going to be really hard to create buckets unless you play KPJ and then take out Amir Coffey. And, Amir's looked pretty decent in preseason so far, and he's a reliable oh my God, what am I saying? A reliable player on this team that's been here for a couple of years. And last season, look, he didn't play well in his first playoffs, but he had a very solid season off the bench, especially when we were playing well, 26-5. Inevitably, I hope it doesn't happen this season, but every year Amir Coffey gets rotation minutes, both seasons that he has, he's gone into maybe he's actually better than Terrence Mann conversation. So that might happen again this year if they're both coming off the bench, but I'm hoping it doesn't and Terrence starts. But those are my concerns with this lineup is, do we have that scoring punch off the bench without Norm? And if KPJ's playing, someone's getting booted out of the rotation when everyone's healthy. And, of course, the defensive concerns with Harden and Norm in the same lineup. But offensively, it's the best-case scenario. Now, coming up, the most likely scenario for opening night, no Kawhi. What should our starting lineup and team and rotation look like if that is the case? Going to be talking about that coming up. I got to tell you a little something about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And right now, there are odds for the NBA ready to go. As far as the Pacific Division, they have the Clippers in dead last at plus 1,200, which is hilarious. I would actually, why not throw some money on that? Because if Kawhi is healthy, I think we could easily be better than some of these bozo teams that I don't think are that good. Luka Doncic is the favorite to win MVP right now. Jokic right behind him. I don't think you could go wrong with either of them. SGA third, a former Clipper, and I think he's got a really good chance just given that the Thunder are most likely going to get the 1 seed, which sucks for us for the picks, but whatever. Where you go do that, that's FanDuel.com. All right. So to close it out, let's talk about the most likely scenario for this opening night, and that is that Kawhi Leonard is not going to be healthy. It really hurts, man. It really hurts. New season, same old story, new building. Just hoping to see, how can I expect and hope and dream of envisioning Kawhi being healthy in front of a sold-out Clipper playoff crowd at Intuit when he's not even healthy for the opening night at Intuit? I'm going to have to rely, and we're going to have to rely on a James Harden masterclass on opening night against the Big Three Suns. And I hate Phoenix so much. I really don't like them. It's 20 years with these guys. I just can't stand them. They're the only team in NBA history to beat us 3 times in the playoffs. And to open up the new building with a loss to them would just be so annoying. But I don't know. Maybe James Harden goes off for 40 and 10 on opening night. Who knows? He's capable of that. But let's talk about what that lineup should be that night. And I think it's very obvious. You got to have Norm to score. So it's Norm, Kawhi, Norm, Harden, Zoo, Terrence, and Derek Jones. You have your defense, you have your scoring, and you have your Zoo. We are going to have to do a lot of feeding Zoo, especially without Kawhi. I'm telling you, if he doesn't get 10 shots per game, and I'm talking 3 dump downs per quarter, in games that Kawhi doesn't play, we got to have some serious conversations about Ty Lue. Eventually, only so much high pick and roll and variations of spread pick and roll are smart for a team. Sometimes you have a guy underneath the basket. The original strategy of basketball was to use a post-up player because you're throwing the ball around the basket and throwing it to your biggest guy that has a physical advantage. Now, that's viewed as archaic now because because I'm going to just say it, because guys do not post. That whole zone argument, teams don't even play real zones. And Zubats rarely actually gets fronted in the post. Maybe rarely is not the right word. It's not that frequent that he's getting fronted in the post, that teams are that afraid to, allow Zubats to catch the ball. But what I will say is it's easier to double the post guy because also his back is turned, right? But that's a long rotation when you're coming all the way from the perimeter down to the block. And that's when Zoo's going to have to improve his playmaking out of that low post. Because that, I think, is the fear as well. But you're never going to know if you don't try. If Ty Lue doesn't give him the ball in the post, I'm serious, man. He should demand a trade or something. Because he got a contract. I'm tired of seeing Zoo underutilized. There's no excuse this year. But yeah, no Kawhi. Look, there's not much to say about that lineup. It's not very good. It's very defense heavy. Actually, not even, because you have Norman Harden out there. But we're going to have to win with our defense and then James Harden's individual brilliance. The more we score and knock down our open shots, though, the more it'll allow our defense to set. And I think James Harden and Norman Powell to start the season should be decent defensively. But that's the thing. It's very likely we don't have Kawhi. That will 90% be the lineup that we go with, I think. But that's all for this one. Enjoy the game against I almost said the Sonics. Against the Blazers on Friday night, if you haven't already watched it. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod. Subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA Clipper, LA Sports, and NBA content. I'll be announcing my plans for the season this weekend. And Locked On Clippers is free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Make sure you let me know what your favorite starting lineup is for this season with Kawhi and without Kawhi. And any comments you have on the episode. As always, I'm always looking to take constructive criticism, especially from real Clipper fans. Fanboys. It feels like every argument I get into is with a fanboy of either Harden or Kawhi just being annoying. So, you guys, can't wait till you leave. Everybody else, love you to death. The age-old proverb continues. Go Clippers, go Dodgers. Have a great weekend.